if we think about Formula One cars, you know, you could have the best, fastest, most winning car in the Formula One world and have a bad driver, and that car will not win. Just the same, you could have the best driver in the Formula One economy, some of these, most wins, but have a bad car. And no matter how great that driver is, if the engine is not sufficient and the car is not sufficient, the driver will never win. So, in this case, the driver is the leader. The vehicle is the business engine, as Dale Carnegie refers to it as the engine of success. And collectively, if you have greatness in both, the entire business wins, and the business needs both to win.
Welcome to the Next Steps to Leadership with your host, Dr. Stephen Oliver. In each episode, we invite experts to share their passion and their leadership journey to help you in your next steps. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on our website, hrcvision.com. Now, here's the host of Next Steps to Leadership, Dr. Stephen Oliver.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to my podcast, Taking the Next Step to Leadership. I'm Dr. Stephen Oliver, or Dr. O, and the purpose of my podcast is to give some ideas, tips, and techniques for younger and newer managers. I invite senior leaders, I invite human resource leaders, nursing leaders, authors, owners of businesses, just to talk a little bit about their careers, talk about the successes they've had, and maybe give some advice on some of the speed bumps for leadership. So my guest is Garrett Delph, founder and CEO of Clarity Ops. Welcome, Garrett. Really glad to have you today. How are you doing?
Thanks, Dr. O. It's really great to see you. Great to be here. Happy Friday.
Right. We're at a Friday.
I'm doing great. Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome. Well, I wanted to just start out and see if you could just tell us first and foremost a little bit about what you're up to, and then I like to talk about Clarity Ops. So, what are you up to today? What's going on with some of the things that you're doing?
Yeah. Thank you. By the way, really excited about a new initiative we launched a few months ago, and it's called Clarity Apps.
Okay.
So, the sort of foundation for everything I do at Clarity Ops is based on, principle-driven, what we call FAST systems. It stands for frameworks, assessment systems, and tools, all bundled together into this sort of collective solution. And they've become very popular, well accepted, and for the longest time we've been trying to figure out how do we scale that to business leaders, because we've increasingly just see that there's not enough really good bespoke business apps that are lightweight, that are portable, and that you can start using in a business immediately without a ton of money and not needing a ton of experience or expertise. So that's really, really fun. We're really excited about that. And those are all coming to market very soon.
All right. I didn't want to go too far off of where we're going, but what's one example of a business app that someone can utilize to help them?
Yeah. One example is a core values playbook builder.
Okay.
Another example is an on-ramping app, lightweight, super effective. Another example is a people viewer, basically a fast, simple way to see all of the people in your organization, see what they're doing, what departments they're in, what their skills are, and be able to run quick AI search analytics on anything you want to know about what people are doing and where they do it in the org, and perhaps where you have gaps. We have about 25 plus apps. There's 3 or 4 of them.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, I think that's a whole nother podcast that we can do coming up.
Yeah.
So I wanted to just ask a little more about Clarity Ops and this mopping up and fixing. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that. It seems to be a passion of yours from our initial conversations together.
Yeah, it is. And I don't know why, by the way, but
Right.
Right? Everybody's got their own thing.
Yes.
I think so. You know, the idea is, 9 in 10 businesses fail. This is
Right.
a hard and true fact. There's no getting around it. And many of them, most of them, fail in the early years, between 1 and 3 years. And that's primarily because most entrepreneurs that start businesses, like all of us, you kind of just you don't know what you're doing, and so you're really scrappy, and you start building, and you fail to build a foundation. And so what ends up happening is, as you build and grow, that foundation cracks, or the lack of foundation implodes. And so my goal is to, there's sort of 2 stages for businesses early on: help them build a foundation so that they can grow and scale in perpetuity. No entrepreneur
Right.
starts a business with the intent to fail, right? You
Correct.
start a
Yeah.
business because you want to win. And so that's part and parcel to that component. And then there's the phase two, and that is businesses that made it past 3, 5, perhaps 10 years. They have decent revenue, they figured out product market fit, but they fell prey to the law of entropy, which is everything always increasingly wants to move from order to disorder. And in the businesses that I've built, that became extremely apparent to me early on.
Right.
And I made the decision to make it a focus to constantly set up a moat
Mm-hmm.
to guard and battle against entropy,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically a strategy that focuses on being sturdy, being operational sturdy,
Mm-hmm.
which leads into our P3 topic. And
Okay.
so, especially for that phase two, and it just so happens it's like Disneyland for me.
Right.
I go in and basically do turnarounds for businesses, and identify all the breakage, all the gaps, all the things that have, prevented them from growing, tanked their gross margins, created a bunch of culture debt in the company,
Mm-hmm.
and essentially systematically fix those things, but in a way where they won't need me in the future, because now they have
Right.
rails that they can be on. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what Clarity Ops does.
Well, that's great because it's going to lead into the 3 Ps and the questions. I love the Disney. That's the moat. I thought of a castle and a moat around,
Sure. Yeah.
and businesses failing. But I wanted to just ask you a quick question for
Yeah.
your first principle. Why do you think so many businesses who start out, entrepreneurs, don't build that foundation? Why do you think they don't really create that?
The long and short of it is this is a 2-part answer. You don't know what
Yes.
you don't know.
Right.
Yeah, you just don't know what you don't know. And systems are complex. Those are the
Yeah.
two, short answers to a very, very important question.
Yeah. I mean, when I asked that question and when you were speaking, I thought of a close friend of mine who owned a restaurant, and
Yeah.
excellent chef, great cook. He still
Yeah.
cooks. He doesn't own it anymore, but
Okay.
did not think of all those foundations of advertising and marketing. And a lot of restaurants put chairs outside for their cafe, but
Yeah.
I live in Philadelphia, and you have got to go to Philadelphia and get approval for that. You can't just put
Yeah.
chairs out there because they want to tax you. But
God.
but again, the great cooking, but just not thinking of all these business things, which to me are the foundation. Now he survived 6 years, and that's a long time in the restaurant industry.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
and I think he got to the second point. He learned all those things. He learned how to do all those things to build his business and advertise. But then he
Yeah.
got into that second process you were saying, um,
Yeah.
the disorder that happened. And so
Yeah.
maybe that's the second question I have is what leads them to that second comment you made in this disorder? You started to mention those.
Yeah. Well, again, these are just my opinions, but they are based on experience, both my own journey and also working with customers. But I think it is extremely common, even for businesses that make it past 3, 5 years, to survive in the middle of disorderly chaos. Like that.
Yes.
That
Hmm.
is status quo. So I just want to make clear, like, most businesses live that way, and they don't understand how to not live that way. There's an old
Yes.
quote I heard a long time ago that I don't feel right unless I feel wrong.
Okay. Nice.
Right. And so disorder and chaos is the status quo.
Uh-huh.
But it sucks, and it's horrible for the business. It's horrible for the people. And, but I guess kind of going back to your question about Clarity Ops, I have designed methods and ways to eliminate chaos and perpetuity. And it cost me a lot of time and energy and fret to get there, but it works. And so, for businesses that have gotten to the point where they just go, I actually hate chaos. I want to do so. I despise disorder because of all of the negative effects to our people and the business. I want to do something about it. There is a way.
And this just is coming in my mind, and I'm kind of going off script, but my friend who owned that restaurant wanted to do every single thing himself, cooking, menu prep, serving, but running everything. And it was so hard for him to give away things, to delegate. Do you think that's also indicative of a lot of entrepreneurs and businesses?
You know what? I think it is, but I'm not sure it's heavily weighted one way or the other.
Okay.
I think there are a ton of different reasons that cause problems in businesses that stem from the founders and the CEOs, et cetera. That said, I do think one of the biggies is a founder's inability to let go and to delegate.
Yep. I hear it over and over. And I hear it in big businesses, especially when I also do leadership training. And I hear that in the different departments in a large organization. So in individual departments are that way. The whole organization is. So very frustrating. So we're going to go into your 3 Ps, your people, process, performance, and tips. But before we do that, I just wanted to ask about you and being an entrepreneur. It's very exciting. What is that like for you, Garrett, to be an entrepreneur?
It's a great question, Dr. O. I think it is doing irrational things with extraordinary focus over an extraordinary amount of time.
Okay.
So like being an entrepreneur is irrational.
Right.
It is all bets are against you.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You are betting on the biggest odds. So to be an entrepreneur and pursue it, that is the irrational step.
Right.
And then in order to continue with momentum through irrationality, you really have to be laser sharp focused about what you want and how you're going to get there.
Yes.
And then you have to demonstrate that knack consistently over extraordinary periods of time. And that, I think, I've heard a lot of other really great anecdotal quotes for what it is to be an entrepreneur, but I think for me that sums it up.
That's fantastic. And if you don't mind, I would just add to, because I myself am an entrepreneur, is you just have to shift and take things, and some things start and they go great. Other things stop immediately, and you have to just pick yourself up, dust yourself off, go on to something else, and then take a risk and do things.
That's right.
Also spend money to make money.
True. This is true, man.
Yeah, so great. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's really wonderful, and I think that might help. So can you tell us a little bit about your 3 Ps for leadership: people, process, and performance? What is that? What do they mean?
Yeah, I'm happy to share that. It's obviously it's a very simplified statement about kind of what makes up a business, but at the end of the day, I needed to figure out a way how to communicate what do I think like the pillars that hold a business together, and how are they integrated, and that's really what led to this idea of P3, and it's 3 Ps. They stand for people, process, and performance.
Okay.
And so the P is the first, and they do go in that order, by the way.
Right. Okay.
So the first P, the pillar, is people. People.
And so can you tell us a little bit more about people? How is that used in the model? And then I'd like to go through the other 2 as well.
Yeah, happy to. So the reason I started with people is because every business that survives, every business that makes it, any great business always has great people. Always. Well, let's start here. It always has people.
Right. Yes.
Even in the age of AI, where you might have less people, You still need and you have people. I love what Danny Meyer said. He wrote the book Setting the Table.
Okay.
He's the the big restaurant guru of New York. Also very well known for Shake Shack.
Yes.
But he said a lot of really famous entrepreneurs say focus on the customer, but he determined his best investment is to focus on the people first, and then the customer will be taken care of when you take care of your people internally. And so people is all about putting laser sharp focus on caring for your people, and at least through my lens, it is doing that systematically, by design, not by chance.
Okay.
And so, caring for your people by taking the time to invest in defining what you believe in, your core values, and then living by those by design on purpose. Taking the time to build an org chart and define that with maniacal focus. Taking the time to define really well orchestrated job descriptions, because job descriptions are basically a collective of all of the engine parts in your motor. And they all have to synchronize and work together. So that needs to be really curated and well defined. Taking the time to build career paths for great people that you hire, right? And the moment they show up and they go through onboarding, they are invited to their future opportunities, if they want them, in better titles and better pay and better learnings. Taking the time to articulate succession plans, so that when great leaders you pay over the course of 5 years, over $1 million to, that have all of this embedded, organizational knowledge, they don't leave with all of your knowledge in their brain. It's all being captured and put into a knowledge system, and you have preparation to replace people when they leave, because they will. So I could go on and on. There's 17 in the people category.
Right.
But focusing on the people.
Good strategies and good things that leaders can do. And I might just add to that and connect. My last podcast was with Dr. Beth Kaplan, who connects with the University of Pennsylvania. And she has just written a new book on belonging in the workplace. And, it really connects to what you're saying, is how do we get people to feel like they truly belong in an organization, and they're valued and they're respected and they're listened to and heard. Because if a lot of people don't feel like they belong, then they're going to look elsewhere. So
so this is a great topic, Dr. O.
Yes.
Because here's what I've seen when I go into organizations. They say the same thing.
Yes.
But so they have this really great strategic what. What should we do? You should make sure that your people feel like they belong. But most businesses don't understand how to do it.
Right.
What are the strategic steps to make sure that people feel like they belong? And my whole hypothesis with Clarity Ops, and as a fellow entrepreneur, is most businesses leave out the how, which is why they fall short of the what.
Yes, exactly.
And so they fall short of the what because they don't know how. And my claim is it's systematic. So, let's take the idea of feeling, like you belong. Well, if one of the things that a business values is great people, and they value finding great people to do the right role, and they spend the time to get a people market fit with their job description, now you have somebody doing something they're really good at and they love it too. Yeah, most businesses don't think that way. Well, here's another one: leadership agreements. So speaking of belonging,
right,
and empowering, but also requiring that leaders have a benchmark of professionalism, of integrity, right, and of empathy, and that is architected and used daily by leadership to empower people, right? SOP. Here's another one. Why do people feel belong? Because they're well led. They're given rails and instructions on what to do, and they're empowered that way. A lot of companies don't have SOPs. So I'm fascinated by the topic, as you can tell.
Yes.
But it is about, in my opinion, converting the what into strategic how. And that's and I think that's where you get really great mileage in these areas.
And I love that, the belonging, you make people feel like they are welcomed and wanted at the organization, because then it helps them in the people process, which you talked about, and then getting to the strategic. It's so great you mentioned empathy because so many businesses are focused on getting deliverables done and products out
Yeah.
the door, services delivered
Yes.
time. But what's the empathy? Ever since COVID, people are a little bit more frustrated. And so, how do we have more empathy but still get the work done? Um,
Yeah. Well, so again, I appreciate the how.
hmm
In my opinion, it starts at the top.
hmm
Empathy is only an outcome when you value it. And so if the top of the org values empathy and they value their people feeling like they are respected and they value their people feeling like they belong, then you have to define to your leaders here's a requirement of how you lead and how you operate.
hmm
And then they teach their leaders how to be empathetic. And what does that look like, brass tacks,
hmm
in the middle of a difficult situation where somebody's underperforming or did something dumb or broke a
hmm
rule or was, outlashed at somebody, right? Like this is the real stuff. When politics are involved, how are you
Right,
empathetic? You know what I mean? When
right.
somebody feels threatened, how are you empathetic? And so, again, I would go back to, man, love the buzzword, empathy, great buzzword.
Yes,
Everybody loves it, but how do you do it?
exactly.
How do you do it? You got to define that, and then you got to train it, and then you put it into the accountability loop. This is where you have transformation.
Yes. And then also the emotions, the emotional intelligence, because as you just said, it's hard to give performance feedback or get someone to do something because you've got emotions in yourself and to have that
That's
empathy.
right.
I think that's yet another podcast.
Yeah, sure.
So how
For
about the
sure.
process? Let's go to process. Thank you that was a really, really nice discussion there. How about the process? What's going on with the process after you've focused on people?
Yeah. I mean, listen, process can get really messy and complex, but at the end of the day, process is just instructions. It's just instructions on what am I supposed to do. And the reason that this P is there is because business outcomes are hyper dependent on how stuff is done. Because if you don't control, and I do mean control in a good way, if you don't control how stuff is done, then you have variance. Because lots of hands usually are touching what
hmm
needs to be done. And when you combine lifetime value of employees, constantly, new ones coming, old ones leaving,
hmm
if you don't have control over how things are done, then your outcomes are variable.
hmm
And variable outcomes are bad for business. It's what
Yes.
causes one of the reasons they fail. And so one of the primary goals of a business is to control your outcomes. How do you control your outcomes?
hmm
Well, first, start with people. Give those people great instructions that are very clear for them on how to do what, how long it takes,
hmm
what the quality benchmark is, and then set them free. And then, right, and then you sort of what we call MSM, maintain, support, and measure,
hmm
maintain, support, and measure, maintain, support, measure. And then you put in a feedback loop or a continuous improvement loop every quarter. And then you have a really nice, well-oiled process engine.
hmm And I would bet you also have to focus back on your mission, you know, when all these hands are in things. What is our true mission? Why is it we're here? And I do a lot of that in my leadership training is to get people to go focus back because everybody is so busy they can lose sight of the mission. Some newer people aren't even aware of the mission, and that to me is a little alarming if the leader can't articulate the mission and why we're here, and
Yeah,
connecting to
you are
that process because people get
you are
so caught up in the process.
Yeah, yeah, and I want to be clear. P3
hmm
is extremely connected,
hmm
right? And so there is a lateral theme that goes through P3, and it's called the Reminder app.
hmm
And I got this idea actually from the ex CEO of LinkedIn. His name's Jeff Weiner.
Okay, right.
And he said his primary role in the business is to be the chief reminder officer.
hmm
And that is tied to Dr. O mission.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And so he said, the moment I no longer want to constantly remind the people in the company about where we're going is the moment I should stop being the CEO.
Right. hmm
So it's really compelling. And so this idea of reminding is riddled throughout
Mhm.
P3.
And it reminds me of, I have several examples, but I taught a class a few years ago, and a woman who worked for Hershey's Chocolate in Hershey, Pennsylvania, was in that class. And the wonderful thing is she brought chocolates every week. So,
I love
but
it.
there was at one point where Hershey's was getting so many products, so many side products, and then they were starting to lose focus. People were
Hmm.
lots of hands were in things, and the
Yep.
CEO said, "We need to come back to focus on chocolate. Let's focus on chocolate and some of our core fundamental products and reduce that." And I think a
I
lot of
love that.
businesses do that. They expand and they touch many things, but then they get away from why they were there. And your comment about many hands, that's what triggered my mind. So,
Oh, I love it.
yep.
And that
Um,
is one of the benefits of actually having, going back to P3, it's one of the benefits of process being a focus because it forges and requires this idea of subtraction
mhm.
and this idea of elimination, which is going to the outcomes and working backwards. Where you go, okay, what do we
Mhm.
want, and what's getting in the way of what we want to get and where we want to arrive, which really ties in nicely to focus on chocolate.
Right,
It forges focus.
right. Kisses and the Hershey bar. That's it. Well, it's not
Love
it,
it.
but those are the primary things that keeps them going. So, Garrett, how about the last of the three P's, performance? Can you talk a little bit about that in the model?
Performance is it's execution.
Hmm.
That's what it is. In the P3 model, it's performance, however, that is prepared, well prepared, to execute in a way that is almost going to guarantee and create certainty the outcomes that the business expects because the business invested in the people, invested in the process, the people pillar, the process pillar, and now they're executing. And for the P3 model, the differentiator here is it has a kind of a buffer of accountability, right? So I found just over the years, even the most amazing people, all of us, if left to ourself, generally, if
Hmm.
left to ourself when we execute, we will fall prey to entropy,
Right.
or we'll fall prey to, right? We'll take shortcuts, we'll slack, whatever. And so now what you have in the performance pillar is the power of
Hmm.
accountability, which is management and leadership. And I used to be when I was running my companies, I went through a season where I was really afraid of enforcing accountability because of this, you know, stigma of micromanagement, and that is a real thing, by the way. And there is micromanagement is a thing, but in my opinion, when you have great people with great process and then they're hired to execute, and then you have an accountability layer, which is management and leadership. That is actually healthy management, not micromanagement. Even the best of the best, the Michael Jordans of the world, yeah, all of the great players and great people who have done great things, they all testify to needing great mentors and needing great leadership to hold you accountable to be your best. And so that's the performance pillar. And then we insert part of that accountability rhythm is this thing we call MSM: maintain, support, and measure. And so you constantly have this rhythm of execution, and then part of that is learning curves and making sure that you always continuously improve as well. And then what you do now as a result is you almost guarantee the outcomes that the business wanted and planned for.
So my question to you about entropy is, my how do leaders? What are some of the roadblocks? How do they get into this entropy, um, and how might they use these three P's to move them forward?
It's a great question, Dr. O. Well, I think, in my opinion, the reason organizations fall prey to entropy is unawareness. They're just unaware, and they're paying attention to revenue. They're paying attention to trying to build great products. They're not paying attention to ops. So at the end of the day, P3 handles that for you because it brings hyper awareness and solution to the very thing entropy causes. So when you have a system, and which is a moat, entropy is not your enemy, or at the very least, it can't get inside because the system protects you.
Fantastic. So and as we're going to close now, I wanted to just quote one of your comments that you made when we were discussing. You said great leaders have great systems. Great systems need great leaders. Great businesses need both. Anything to add to that? That's such a wonderful quote.
Yeah, well, I think the thing I would add that I think helps make the point simply is a metaphor. And so, like, if we think about Formula One cars, you could have the best, fastest, most winning car in the Formula One world and have a bad driver, and that car will not win. Just the same, you could have the best driver in the Formula One economy, some of these, most wins, but have a bad car. And no matter how great that driver is, if the engine is not sufficient and the car is not sufficient, the driver will never win. So, in this case, the driver is the leader. The vehicle is the business engine, as Dale Carnegie refers to it as the engine of success. And collectively, if you have greatness in both, the entire business wins, and the business needs both to win.
That's fantastic. Well, this has been such a great conversation. Garrett, any final words of wisdom for younger leaders?
I would say a few things maybe. Pursue valuing what is right. Build up your focus, your grit, your patience. Major in the minors. You won't hear that much.
Okay. Right.
Major in the minors. Success is through 1,000 optimizations. Find great mentors. Don't be hasty. Commit to learning.
Fantastic. That's so profound. Thank you. Well, I wanted to just thank you so very much, Garrett, for joining us today in the Next Step to Leadership. Really appreciate you coming. Great words of wisdom about being an entrepreneur, helping to fix organizations, and really good tips for our listeners, the 3 Ps for leadership: people, process, and performance. So thank you so very much for coming today. Really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my privilege, Dr. O. Thank you for having me, and thanks for your great show.
Sure. And I just wanted to say to everybody, thank you so much for coming to the podcast, Taking the Next Step in Leadership. If you need any assistance with leadership, please check out my own business, HRC Vision, Learning, Leadership, and Human Resource Management. And if you need some assistance with mopping up and cleaning your organization, please reach out to Garrett Delph. So thanks everybody for coming to the podcast.